Welcome to 78th Floor, the podcast that helps you leave a godly legacy for future generations by showing you incredible things God has done in the lives of men and women around the world. If he can do those things in these people's lives, imagine what he can do in yours. I'm Bob.
And I'm Matt. So today, we're going to talk about giving up, quitting. And I don't know, it made me think, have you ever gotten to a point where it feels like the walls are closing in on you, like Star Wars trash compactor style, with squirmy sea monsters lurking below, just in case you survive the crushing? And that's kind of, it feels like that a lot in our world today. And with all the division we're feeling and the hate all around, it can be so tiring day in and day out that we sometimes feel like enough already. I'm out. So when you feel that way in life and work and marriage, whatever you feel like quitting today, what role can God play in helping you get off the mat and keep going? Well, that's what we're going to discuss today, hearing from three people who felt like giving up.
All right, Matt, here's a quote for you.
Okay.
I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I have lost almost 300 games. On 26 occasions, I have been entrusted to take the game-winning shot, and I missed. I have failed over and over and over again in my life. And that is why I succeed. Who said it?
Missed 9,000 shots?
Missed 9,000 shots.
How about a heavy drinker with bad aim?
Oh, jeez, no.
No. No. It's got to be Michael Jordan or Larry Bird. That's my guess.
Michael Jordan.
All right, because it's one of those, you can't make the shot if you don't take the shot, kind of.
Absolutely. Growing up, my dad hammered away at us the idea that you don't quit, no matter what. It's a value I have always respected. And I think that's what I admire most about our first guest today, Gordon Klenck. When he became a missionary with Campus Crusade for Christ, the ministry was so young, nobody really knew what was going on.
I think there were like two people, two staff employees then.
Technically, he is the first.
Right.
He is the first because he got to Bill and Vonette 12 hours before the second guy. That's how he became first.
Right.
Bill was not a theologian. He owned a candy company. He knew how to do business, but he didn't know how to run a ministry. And so let's listen to Gordon talk about what that was like.
No matter what opposition comes, you keep going. It was in 1952 in the spring when a classmate came to me in the library. I was going to college on the East Coast, and he began to share with me the first Campus Crusade for Christ publication. It was called the Campus Crusade Communique. And he said that Bill was looking for young men who had finished college, and I was just finishing then, who would come and work with him for a year or two because what was happening at UCLA was making headlines with people. Bill and Vonette welcomed me very warmly, and we had the first Campus Crusade staff training. And compared to what staff training is now, that was very interesting. What Bill did was talk about how they went into the fraternities and sororities and how students were responding to Christ. So he asked us to prepare the message that we would give. Well, we all did that, came back together, shared what we had written. They were all so poor, and so they just weren't what would communicate well with students. So we asked Bill, the six of us, said, well, what do you say when you go into a fraternity? So he dictated to the secretary. She typed it out, gave it to us, and that became, we called it the, I don't remember, after the testimony, the clincher. Yeah, we called it the clincher. And we memorized it, and then Bill sent two of us, myself and another young man, to UC Berkeley to start the ministry there. our purpose was to start contacting the fraternities and sororities and going in and setting up times when we could go in Monday night after dinner as after-dinner speakers, which was a common thing in fraternities and sororities at that time. Well, neither of us had ever been in a fraternity. In the colleges where we were, there weren't fraternities. So we were very nervous about doing this. And I remember the first fraternity we went to, we knocked on the door. Well, at UC Berkeley, you don't knock on the door of a fraternity house. You just walk in, and whoever you see, you tell them what you want. We would go and say, well, may we speak with your president? I remember the first president came to the door. We were so nervous, it communicated our nervousness to him. And he said, well, I don't know. We'll talk with the guys. I'll talk with the guys at fraternity at the meeting, and give me your phone number, and I'll call you. Well, the first phone call we got was, no, the men aren't interested. Well, that was very discouraging. Halfway through the year, before Christmas, the other staff man left. He quit out of discouragement. I continued on because I'd had it driven into me, you finish the job. No matter what opposition comes, you keep going. Well, I kept going, and the first fraternity meeting that we had, out of that fraternity, there were maybe half a dozen men that wanted to talk further and responded to Christ, including the fraternity president. And well, also out of that came another young man who is now a pastor in Southern California. The next year, we went into one of the other fraternities. We went into a number of fraternities and sororities, but I'm just picking out certain incidents. And this man's name was Pete. And he was, that particular evening, he had just come back. He had finished at UC Berkeley. He'd just come back to see his fraternity house before he left for Korea. He was in the Korean War. And that night, we presented the gospel, and Pete invited Christ into his life, but he'd grown in his Christian life while he was in the service in Korea, and got into Christian publishing, went to South America, started a publishing company in Sao Paulo, Brazil, that published Bibles and Christian books. They translated and published the New Living Translation of the Bible. And now he travels all over the world consulting with Christian publishers. In fact, I just got a letter from him this past week where he was on his way to Angola to meet with the first Christian publishing company in Angola to train this young man who is starting it. Pete says that every Bible and every book that they publish, they see as missionaries, as a missionary. That one meeting has resulted in literally probably thousands and millions of people hearing or knowing something about the Christian life, the Christian faith, because of that one meeting and that one young man.
Imagine what that guy who quit missed out on.
Right.
Thousands of people, probably millions, are in God's kingdom today, in part because Gordon didn't quit. And that's just one aspect of his ministry. He has done so much more. The other guy missed out on all of that.
Yeah, I really don't want to be the other guy.
Yeah, me either.
But I probably have been at some point. And I think it comes down really to trust. Like, for some reason, I'm in a movie analogy today, mood. And so it made me think about Indiana Jones, when that giant boulder is barreling towards him. And it makes sense when you see that boulder to run, like Indy did. But if we trust that God is bigger than that boulder, that thing that's making you want to quit, then really it's about standing strong in your calling and know that God will help you find a way. Now, what about in sharing your faith? I'm sure there's someone you know out there who you've been trying and praying for years for their salvation, your best friend, mom, brother, coworker, but it seems impossible, and even may feel like it's hurting your faith, trusting God for something that just isn't happening. So what do? Do you quit? Well, our next guest, Sherry Slaughter, she experienced that very issue. So let's see how she dealt with it.
I came to know Christ when I was a sophomore in college, and Cru started on our campus about that time. And by the time I graduated, I knew that the Lord was calling me on staff with Campus Crusade. And so when I was communicating with my parents along this journey, my mother was very upset that I would even consider doing this kind of thing. It was the age of cults, and she was scared to death I was involved in a cult. She didn't understand missions. She was so upset that she thought the way she could stop me was to cut me off financially my last semester. And so that didn't stop me because the Lord had called me. So I joined the staff of Cru, which has been 46 years now. There were times when it was a struggle because I wanted my parents to be affirming of what I did. But over the years, my mom and I just pretty much didn't talk a lot about what I do or anything else. But my mom, when she was 90 years old, fell and broke her hip, and she was in rehab. And while she was in rehab, the Lord visited her in a dream and spoke to her about his love for her and his care for her. So when I showed up about a week later to help with her coming home from rehab, she couldn't hardly wait to tell me what had happened. And she just had never known love like she was experiencing now. And all she could say is, I just didn't understand. My mom went from being a very fearful, anxious woman to a very peaceful faith woman in just that short a time. And so for 5 months, we had very sweet fellowship. And she said to me, Sherry, I'm so glad you decided to follow God's call instead of what I wanted you to do. Well, my first thought was, Mom, are you speaking in tongues? Follow God's call is not a part of your language. And then I realized she just gave me her blessing. And I started crying, and I said, Mom, I've waited 43 years to hear you say that. And she said, Sherry, I just didn't understand what you were doing and why you were doing it, but now I do. And she kept saying, all I want to do is go to sleep and wake up in heaven. And so that night, she wanted to go to bed at 4 o'clock in the evening. And I thought, why do you want to go to bed so early? She said, I just want to go to bed. So I put her in bed. The next morning, she woke up angry. And my dad said, what's wrong? And we realized that she thought if she went to bed, the sooner she got to bed, the sooner she'd get to sleep, the sooner she'd wake up in heaven. That's what she really thought was going to happen. But about 4 days later, the Lord took her in a very precious way. She did get to fall asleep and wake up in heaven. And so it was so wonderful to know how the Lord in his faithfulness brought my mom to himself in a way that I never would have known or expected him to do. She really, truly found Jesus before she died. And often I thought if Mom had come to Christ earlier, she would have shared with so many people because that's just was her nature. And the Lord said to me, Sherry, I'm giving you the privilege of sharing her story. And it's just been so sweet to have that realization that he's made me like my mom now, talking to everyone, but for the purpose that I can tell, especially older people. I can tell them, never give up. Never give up. You never know. Those loved ones you've prayed for, you've labored with, you've expected to come to Jesus, you never know when they're going to do it, but you can believe the Lord knows when he's going to bring them to himself.
Never give up. I mean, she just reminds me it's up to God and that person that you care about anyway. It's God who works on the heart. And so if it doesn't fall on you, their salvation, first, it takes the pressure off. But second, why would you give up? There's nothing to do on our part but to be there for them. And again, trust God. I mean, time isn't on our side since we don't know what's going to happen later today or tomorrow, but God does, and God's timing is perfect. And I know it's nerve-wracking how God plays it sometimes and likes to pull it out in the last second, like Drew Brees, with the Saints. But we're just there for the ride, and we just got to trust. So we've discussed not quitting in job or ministry and not quitting on sharing God's love. But what about something you've invested like your entire life to, like marriage? And everything seems to be going wrong. What then?
All right, Matt, you've been married for how long?
20 years.
Really?
Yeah, I know I don't look it, but it is true.
You got such a baby
I have
face.
a baby face.
Has it always been easy?
Bob, it wasn't even easy yesterday. So no, Bob, it's not always easy. Did you know that a sock, Bob, on the floor does not mean you're messy? Somehow, and I don't know how, a wife thinks it means you don't love her anymore. So it can be rough. It can be rough. It's not easy.
Should you be getting the couch ready when she hears this episode?
I already did. I made it up.
Okay. All right. So it's hard, but is it worth it?
Marriage, is it worth it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
You're 20 years. Has it been worth it?
I mean, she's the best thing that ever happened to me, and she gave me everything I have today. But you do forget that sometimes.
I heard the story a long time ago that a reporter asked Billy Graham's wife, Ruth, if she'd ever consider divorcing Billy. And Ruth said, divorce? Never. Murder? Many times.
Right. And that does explain why my wife watches Dateline and murder shows a lot.
Oh, great. She's
And
figured
now
where to
I'm
put the body.
definitely sleeping on the couch. It's a comfy couch. No, but marriage is hard. There's no getting around it. Trusting someone with your life, your vulnerabilities, and the hurt that can sometimes come after so many years. I understand how many, many married people think that quitting is the only option left. Which brings us to our final guest. Right, Bob?
Yep. And that's John and Wendy Beckett. When we shot this interview, they'd been married 58 years. If anyone knows the blessings that come from not giving up, it's them. Now, one note though, even though we're talking about marriage, a lot of what they say is true for many aspects of life, not just marriage.
You know, I suppose right behind the question of how did you meet each other, the next question is, well, how did you stay together for 58 years? I take that question pretty seriously because in our society today, if you're going down a highway, there are a lot of exit ramps. And when issues arise, what's the way through? The way through is Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
And we don't want that to sound like Sunday school, where Jesus is the answer to everything. But in marriage, if we start with the premise that God put us together and that we're one flesh, it's actually a model of Christ and the church. He uses that analogy. He has taken two and in marriage made them one flesh. And then he said, what God has put together, let no man rip apart. We just feel it would be a tremendous disappointment to the Lord if we didn't have the perseverance to work through challenges when they come up within the context of our Christian walk.
Mm-hmm. And then remember that early on, we read in the scriptures about the Lord completing in each of us what he has begun. And if we have the faith to believe that, even if we're not there yet, and if we see all the things that are wrong in our spouse, but how about thinking of the things that are right? And how about trusting the Lord to work in each one his good pleasure and having faith to believe it's possible?
It gave me tremendous hope that even in situations that appear to be dire, where there is no hope, there can be hope. And I would just encourage people to not bail quickly, to not take an easy route out. And the starting point is to humble ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
The issue usually revolves around pride. And I can speak as a man, I know that's there in my own heart and I have to guard it all the time. But when people will humble themselves just saying, I'm sorry, you know, that can be momentous. It can also be very difficult. We're going to screw up. I mean, it's part of life. But then to be able to say, honey, I'm sorry.
Forgiving. The Lord taught me very early the importance of forgiving. And we've tried to walk in that.
There are times that come to the end of the day, we've still got some friction there, but we're not going to let the day close without trying to get it right.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
I don't know any pattern for growth that is void of encountering problems and working through problems in a way that we invite Christ into the midst of it. That is how we grow. And if I'm somebody today that I wasn't 50 or 60 years ago, it's because of this process. It's because of allowing Christ to take us through, not around, not bailing out, but pressing through in a way that ultimately becomes a precious thing. It becomes part of the fabric that enables us to stand against whatever the next assault is. And it will be there. There will be something down the road. There will be something that we haven't encountered before, but we have the confidence that he'll see us through.
Yeah. It's a nourishing thing. It's nourishing that love that God put in between a man and his wife.
And quitting isn't an option.
Yes, I think that's the thing that we have decided, that quitting is not an option.
Jesus talked about this, didn't he? He said, the storm comes, the waters rise, the winds blow, and a house that is built, a marriage that is built on a sound foundation, is in much better position to withstand those forces. It's an anchor in the storm. I know what I've committed to, and I'm not going to allow that to waver no matter what.
And that's a precious thing for a wife, to have that assurance from her husband that that's the way he believes, and that's how life is going to be. I mean, what an honor and what a privilege, and to be loved like that, I'm just so grateful.
But it's reciprocal. I mean, I say the same thing. That I drive security from Wendy's love as she does from mine.
Yes. So don't give up on your marriages. Don't think that it's just be somebody better on the other side of the fence, because that will not be true. Your marriage is what you in God make it. And so work on it and trust the Lord to work in each of you the things that he wants to do. That's, I believe, where we can find unity and stay together as a husband and wife.
Because of our faith. He's held it together, and the fruit of that has just been precious.
John said, I don't know any pattern for growth that is void of encountering problems and working through problems in a way that invites Christ into the midst of them. That is how we grow. And Michael Jordan said, obstacles don't have to stop you. If you run into a wall, don't turn around and give up. Figure out how to climb it, go through it, or work around it. That's the thread that runs through all the stories we heard today. Gordon's ministry was a disaster at first.
Right.
But he never quit. He gave it to the Lord, and God did remarkable things through him. Sherry, she faced rejection from her parents. And that's like one of the toughest rejections you can get. But she didn't quit. And it may have taken 43 years, but look at what God did.
Yeah.
And John and Wendy, they found the incredible blessings and joy that come from not quitting in the most important relationship a person can have.
And again, I think when confronted with quitting anything, it comes to trust. If God put you in a place, in work or ministry, in marriage, do we trust that God will protect us and get us through any fix that he himself put us in? That he who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion. That's God's promise.
I think one of the biggest lies we like to tell ourselves is that God will never give you anything bigger than what you can handle. Yes, he will. The Bible is full of it. God puts us in situations that we have to rely on him.
Right. And if you're ever led into something by God and you know God led you there, he promises he'll get you through. And when the story that you don't fully know yet of your life is written, what an amazing story it will be. So don't quit. God is with you.
I heard a speaker say this once, and I've never forgotten it. He said, I think the thing you're going to hear the most when we get to heaven and God lays out our lives in front of us, the thing you're going to hear most is, of course. One person after another going, of course, that's why that had to happen. And they see that God had a purpose in all of these tough things happening in your lives. And that's why you don't quit, because it's a matter of trusting God that he is bigger than the situation. He's bigger than COVID. He's bigger than political problems. Mm-hmm. He's bigger than you name it. God is bigger. And the issue is trusting him and relying on him, and he does incredible things through it.
Exactly. So that ends our episode on giving up, on quitting. And we want to thank you for not quitting in the middle of this podcast and getting all the way through it.
Our hope with 78.4 is that it will help you flourish in your relationship with Jesus, to learn to trust in him in the really tough times and to not quit. And that's why we've included the links to articles and tools in our show notes as a way of helping you grow in him and becoming a real difference in somebody else's life. So please check out our show notes. Also, please email us. We'd love to get to know you.
And the audio you heard today comes from some of the more than 400 and growing videos on our website, legacy.cru.org. That's legacy.cru.org. We also have a YouTube channel called Cru Legacy and a Facebook page. Please check it out. And if you like today's podcast, we ask that you please subscribe so you can get the next one and the next one and the next. Also, please rate us. It helps others hear about our podcast. Don't hoard it for yourself. That's not very nice.
78.4 is a podcast of Legacy, a project of Cru.
Thanks for listening. We'll be back next week, and while we're away, we want to encourage you, as always, to remember that whatever God did in the lives of the people you heard speak today, he can do in you. So until we're together again, go out there and continue the legacy.